moving on to human geography in Africa. Although we're studying this as a whole entire continent, it's really difficult to categorize the people of Africa into one category. They are very diverse. You've got all sorts of ethnic groups, the Arabs in the north. You have Europeans left over from the 1500s and their colonization. You have small tribes and groups like the Berbers, the Pygmies, the Hutus, the Tutsis, the Bantu, the Afrikaans. There's all sorts of smaller subgroups that unfortunately don't always get along, so that causes some issues. Africa is the second largest in population. Asia is first in size and in population, and Africa is second in size and in population. And remember, they're also, the poorest economic region or continent. Mostly they live in villages with their own family or small tribes or clans. There are hundreds of different ethnic groups, which I mentioned earlier, which has led to lots of violence, lots of civil wars, lots of conflicts, lots of genocides and so forth. So ethnic groups. Languages can be an ethnic group. So there are some English-speaking people, French-speaking people, obviously from kind of remaining left over from European colonization. In the north, they're primarily speaking Arabic. And then you have other African unique languages like Swahili. There are several different Bantu languages. I think in one country in particular, they have 11 different Bantu languages that they speak. And then Afrikaans, which is kind of a unique language that was created in South Africa. Religion is also very different on this continent. Christianity is popular because of the European colonization, primarily Catholic, but there's also some Protestant. Islam, those are mostly in the northern countries that speak Arabic. And there are traditional religions that are practiced, like voodoo, for example, a lot of indigenous or ancestral religions that relate to spirits and family. There's a religion that is focused on nature and spirits, very similar to polytheism of ancient times, called animism. And of course, that's just where, spirits or things are found in nature. The last thing we're going to talk about is issues and diseases, and it's sort of related, of course, to the human geography. So we mentioned that, the continent itself, the people are very diverse in beliefs, in actions, in languages, in economics, and so this is clearly related. So famine or extreme hunger, 1 in 8 people in the world are malnourished or undernourished, and most of those, of course, are in third world countries, which happen to be a lot in Africa, near or south of the equator. Asia and South America also fall into that, but Africa has a lot more countries in that region. Diseases, which we mentioned Ebola with the introduction, but diseases are only complicated more in Africa because they don't have the same access to medicine, doctors, they can't get to the hospital. So all of these things only exacerbate the idea of diseases. So where we might not die of something like a cold or the flu, people in Africa might, because one, they're already, malnourished, and then they don't have access to medical care. All right. So we talked about Ebola, and I think I showed this map a little bit in the introduction. So remember, it began in Guinea, then it spread to Sierra Leone and Liberia, which are right next to it. You can see over here on the western side of the bump of Africa. And then as far as numbers, Liberia had the most deaths in 2014. Remember, it went 2014 to about 2016. So these 3 countries were significantly impacted. Nigeria had some, but not nearly as many. Poverty, we talked about being malnourished and, hunger and that sort of thing. Clearly, poverty is one of the issues of Africa, as is overpopulation. So the irony is the poorest countries in the world have the highest population growth rates. So, for example, in Niger, they have 7.2 children per woman. That's kind of how they record it or can compare it to other countries, compared to something like the United States, where we have just about 2 children per woman, and then places in Europe like Bosnia and Herzegovina that have just over 1 child per woman. So a lot of this has to do with birth control controversy. If they believe in kind of the traditional African religions or Catholicism, Catholic, there's always this controversy about using birth control. It's against their religions, their beliefs. Even if it's not against their religion or their beliefs, they might not have access to birth control. They might not have education on birth control. So there's lots of issues with that. We talked about the diversity, how it's caused a lot of wars and abuse in places like Rwanda, in Sudan, the Darfur region of Sudan, and how South Sudan split off. And a lot of that was due to colonization by the Europeans, who just randomly made borders and didn't take the African people into consideration. AIDS, of course, this is not really brought up a whole lot today, but of course in the 80s it started, and AIDS deaths are all over the world, but unfortunately Africa has a lot of those. So Africa is the highest in the world, and specifically there's an AIDS belt region, which is sub-Saharan Africa, and a lot of those countries are again near or south of the equator. So life expectancy, this is a map, just again, nothing has been updated over the last couple of years, which might change due to COVID, but you can see that the darker things like the purples and the blues live the longest. So in the United States, we're, close to 80 years old. Canada is even more. Australia is even more. Parts of Europe they live even longer. So the Americas are pretty good. Australia is pretty good. Asia is pretty good. Europe is good. Africa is the continent that is in that middle range between, 45 and 55 years old. There are even some countries that are lower than that. But for the most part, you can kind of see just on this world map how different it is. All right. Whoops, I don't want to go to that. I'm going to go back here. All right, so the top 25 countries in AIDS deaths. You don't need to know the numbers, but you might want to know the countries, or at least some big ideas. So South Africa has the most AIDS deaths at 350,000. Again, the numbers aren't really significant, but South Africa. Then we have India, obviously a non-African country in Asia. Nigeria, Africa. Kenya, Africa. Zimbabwe, Africa. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, Africa. Tanzania, Africa. Mozambique is in Africa. Uganda is in Africa. Malawi is in Africa. Ethiopia. Zambia. Russia, again, another Asian country. China, another Asian country. Cameroon, Africa. Cote d'Ivoire, Africa. Thailand in Asia. Burma in Asia. Sudan back in Africa, Vietnam in Asia, the United States, of course in the Americas, Ghana in Africa, Ukraine in Europe or Asia area, Lesotho in Africa, and Brazil in South America. So the big takeaways here, clearly most of them are African countries, and again, they are near the equator. They are south of the Sahara Desert. And again, their life expectancy is low already. Their poverty level is high. Their fresh water, access to food and medical treatment, all of those things, and education are all very limited. So Africa and Asia, which again, might not be a big surprise because those are the two most populated continents. But again, places like India, number 2 on the list, and China, about halfway up the list, they have over 1 billion people. And so they have a lot more people than, say, the United States. So the United States, as educated as we are, as accessible to health care, fresh water, food, all that stuff, we still have lots of AIDS deaths in our own country. So to me, that one sort of sticks out. Brazil, same thing. They're not really in Asia or Africa, but Brazil is, again, going to be a poorer country in South America that's at or south of the equator. And so that kind of falls into that region. The same thing with Thailand, Burma, Vietnam. Those are all right along the equator, so they typically fall into that category. Russia and the Ukraine, they were part of the Soviet Union, which sort of didn't really allow a lot of people in and out, medical treatment in and out, that sort of thing as well. All right, that is it for the notes. Next, you'll be working on your African project. That African project is, again, you're going to be making a Google slide. You're going to be doing some research using the sources that I gave you or that are on the homepage of the World Studies Canvas page. Nobody's going to have the same country. There are 55 countries, so nobody can have the same one. So you'll either draw one out or I can draw one for you. I will tell you what country you have. If you go to the calendar date, and I think this year it's on the 17th, it will give you all the directions of what you need to research and what you're going to do. You're going to use a Google slide. I need your sources in the speaker notes, and that means I don't want any URLs and all that kind of stuff on the slides. They need to be underneath in the speaker notes. And then when you submit it, you need to submit it as change the privacy to anyone at Union and editor. I need to be an editor to see your sources at the bottom. And for any pictures, for any information that is not your own information or your own pictures, you need to tell me the source of that information. Google is not a source. Remember that. So click on the picture, even though you started at Google, click on the actual picture, map, chart, graph, whatever it is, that's the actual source. And so you'll have a couple days to work on that and submit that on the 17th.